Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? So, as I mentioned, today I'm going to be debuting a chassis for this OWP hilt, as well as later on. Oh, hey Christian, how you doing? Later on, I will be doing a install on an ultrasabers Raven for my buddy Marcel. Or actually, this one's for his brother Adrian. I have both of them sent me a Raven to upgrade. One of them is getting a Prizm, that's the one I'll be doing today, and the other one got a Nano Biscotti last week. Oh, of course you're tired. It's, for those of you who don't know, it's like midnight in Germany right now, so she's staying up way too late to watch this. Okay, so what I've got is, hey, what's up, Marcel? How you doing? Thanks for dropping by. This is the Obi Wan Padawan Menace, or Phantom Menace, / Attack of the Clones hilt from Ultimate Works. It's a very nicely put together hilt, and the internal geometry, while a little tricky to manipulate, I guess would be the term. It's not a perfectly round bore. It does lend for some pretty nice chassis. So, in order to access the chassis, get this out of the way. I just need to remove this CoverTech knob and rotate the shroud around. And then you can see we've got a nice crystal reveal going on in there. The way you boot up this saber is grab a hobby knife or a screwdriver or something. Maybe a pair of pliers would work. This guy slides backwards like so, and then what's inside is a rotary kill key. That's just one of the ones off of my Shapeways shop. If you do decide to buy this chassis, one will be included in black. It's just a very low profile kill key. We get the green power on indicator. The fonts on here, I've got a couple of K-Sys fonts and Fates by Mad Cow. So I'll go ahead and fire it up. Of course, get the crystal illumination. Flash on clash, we get a little red indicator goes off. It's mostly it's in brass, steel, and bronze are the Shapeways materials that I used on this thing, as well as it's got, you know, just some copper and aluminum and brass tubes to allow for wire passage. Do that again real quick. Both the crystal and the indicator go off. The reason I chose red is somewhat of a warning light per se. It shows, you know, there's a disruption going on. Of course, this hilt does have a additional cap on the pommel right here. So if I were to close the crystal chamber up and I still wanted to get good sound, I can simply remove this cap. And there's holes in there. As you can tell, the volume already has increased a little bit. Close that back up, put the cover tack back in. And like this, this saber is completely dual worthy. You can fight with this saber. It is sturdy enough to do that, even with the crystal chamber inside. Now this saber is not on a commission per se. It is just one that I built because I love this saber and I needed an excuse to test this chassis, as I have a few people who are hoping to pick one up. So let me throw a blade in here real quick. I hope I got a retention key. Doesn't look like I did. Oh well. Still get the idea of it. It's got a royal blue, blue-white Tricree XPE2. Nice bright blade, nice loud speaker. Overall, a pretty decent looking hilt, in my opinion. And gotta love that crystal chamber. I will be putting nicer photos of this up probably sometime next week, as well as the Shapeways links. There are a few things I want to modify about the chassis. It does work, but I feel like it could be just a little bit nicer, a little bit smoother. So once I've got that all sorted out, I will do a proper reveal post for this lightsaber, as well as get you all the link to get this chassis your hilt. I know, if Aaron, if you're watching, I know that you particularly were asking about this specific chassis. Well, it's almost there, buddy. Just give me a little bit more time and we'll be good to go. That's all I have on that hilt. If you guys give me just a couple of minutes, I'm going to reset for putting together that Raven. So I will be right back. Thank you, Death Star. I think it's pretty awesome as well. And yes, Kristen, the sound of a saber is just awesome. And Marcel is lost for words. That's pretty awesome, buddy. I'm glad you liked this little hilt that I've been putting together. Yours, the more complicated design for yours is in process. I think I should be on the last prototype iteration. For those who didn't know, this is actually one of 2 of my chassis designs for the OWP. The more complex one, I have a couple commissions waiting on as well, but it has taken me, this will be the third set of prototypes to get it just perfect. Once again, you know, it can work, but there are things that can be done better. So, if you'll give me just a second, I will be right back with the Raven install. Alright folks, I'm back. This is the saber in question. As mentioned, it is an UltraSabers Raven for my buddy down in Australia, Adrian Radici. He's commissioned this to have a Prizm 5.1. I'm going to have 2 18650s run in parallel for extended battery life, as this is a saber he likes to take out and go dueling with. Marcel's has the same thing, the 2 in parallel. A Saber Essentials 28mm high bass speaker, and a RGB LED setup. There's also going to be a few additional components such as a rice port, such as and an accent LED in the pommel, so that you'll get a blade matching glow out of those sound vents. You can tell this is definitely a well-loved saber. It's beat up, scratched up, and it's because, as I mentioned, he and his brother love to go dueling with these things, and I can't wait to give you a little improvement on that dueling experience. A Phasma cosplay with a lightsaber. That would be interesting indeed. You know what? I'm looking forward to seeing your take on Phasma because I know that you do all sorts of cool cosplay stuff, Kristen. So this is going to be using a custom designed chassis. I have done a little bit of preliminary work on the chassis before I started the stream, just so as to not bore you guys. It's just printed from Shapeways. It's got the blade holder, 2 battery holders, and the speaker goes in here. The only one unfortunate thing about the speaker holder is that these little snap tabs I modeled do not grab as tightly as I was hoping here, which means I will be using just a little drop of super glue to hold those in place. Now I would like to, before I get started, just do a quick disclaimer. I'm not going to go out there and say that there is only way to approach the installation of a saber, or even that my way is the best way. I learn something new all the time. These are just the practices I have developed over my couple years of experience, and they serve me well. I will say, though, there are certain things that you should be doing no matter what. For example, this mat here is an anti-static mat. My iron is an ESD safe iron. These types of things and so on you should keep track of all the time, and to make sure that your sabers are not going to have any issues before, during, or after you finish installing them. Another thing on that note, my solder, as you can see, the label's all scratched up, but it does have flux in it. Now, if you don't have flux infused or flux core solder, you should get some liquid flux and use that. What it does is it basically makes your solder hug better to the to the wires. It allows it to flow in there a little bit nicer and creates a stronger joint. Some people like to use liquid flux even if your solder doesn't have it in it, but either way you need to have it in at least one form. That's just something that I wanted to clear up, as the last time somebody saw me doing an install, they assumed I was using pure 6040 solder, and I do use that LED, that flux infused stuff. So I'm going to get started. Let's open up this brand new Prizm here. The only thing I've done to the Prizm in advance is I went ahead and threw Marcel's or Adrian's chosen sound fonts on there. This is just Prizm 5.1 from Plector Labs. I'm going to clean off these little burrs on the edges. Those are just from when these are made, they're in giant batches and they all come on a big old plate, and they have small connection points to the other boards on the plate. These are just the remnants of those connection points, and I just need to get rid of those to the point where the board sits nice and happy inside the holder. Still need to get a little shorter on the side. And there we go. Fits in nice and snug, so it won't be popping out or anything, and the wires will give it a little bit of additional stability. Now, of course, I need to get it out. Doesn't want to. we go. So usually the first thing I do is I will wire up the LED. So I'm going to get my heatsink out. This is the original heatsink that came with the lightsaber. I pulled out the ultrasabers internals, and I'm replacing them with this Prizm setup. Grab a heatsink, grab my LED, my lens, my tape, my thermal tape, and a little bit of super glue. If you attach your LED to the heatsink before you attempt to solder on it, it will make your life much, much easier, because it will, rather than the entire LED star heating up and making the solder not behave properly, this heatsink will wick some of that away. As many of you know, these copper bases are designed specifically to distribute heat, so you can get a little bit of flow issues when doing it without the heatsink attached. These stars are a little hard to peel apart. There we go, now it's coming. Alright, this is just a double-sided tape that is also very efficient at transferring heat, so that the heatsink actually does its job and takes the heat away from the LED diodes themselves, or light-emitting diodes. Just make sure that everything is nicely centered and placed so that you can have adequate wire clearance whether you're running it through the middle or down these channels on the sides. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my solder out and tin these pads a little bit. It makes adding the wires much, much easier. The solder I'm using is a 20 thousandths solder, which is approximately a 0.5 millimeter, which means to tin larger pads like these, I have to use a decent amount of it. But it also means that when I'm doing things like SMD LEDs or really tiny switches, I can have a lot more control with the amount of solder and application of it, which is extremely helpful for those little bitty components. These pads do have a little bit of tinning on them already, not quite enough in my opinion to securely attach the wires, so as mentioned, I'm just adding a little bit extra. Now of course I need to get my wires. I'll be wiring this up using a mixture of 28 and 30 gauge wire. So for the LED, I of course there's my blue, here's my green, red, ooh, time to get me red. I may or may not have enough of that, and white for common positive. So let's go ahead and take a look at this red. I am going to have enough, but not by a whole lot. So the way that I gauge is it's pretty simple. I don't do anything fancy or mathematic or whatever. That'll be about enough. Snip that off, and then I'll need the same length in green, blue, and white. For those of you who are just tuning in, thank you for watching. I will go over that OWP again at the end of the stream before I go offline, in case you missed it, and we're hoping to catch that. I do hope to be doing things like this more often as well. A couple weeks ago, I did a little stream of some chassis work People seem to enjoy that, so I'll be doing some of that as well, more of that as well in the future. Hopefully, at some point, I will also be able to do a live stream of some fabrication processes, although I may just stick to recorded and then time-lapsed on that, put it up on the YouTube channel, as it can be a little dull to watch, you know, just a piece of metal spinning while a tool moves across it slowly. Alright, so these are my LED wires. I'm going to strip the ends real quick, and I don't want to strip a whole lot, just enough to where it will fit on the pad. You don't want to have a lot of, actually you don't want to have any of your lead showing. And I didn't get it off on that time, on that one, but one thing I like to do when I'm stripping these wires is I will go ahead and make the cut, but before I actually pull the little piece off, I will twist it, and that gives me a nice coherent and stiffer piece of wire. Alright, as mentioned, those are nicely stripped, a little twisted. I've pre-tinned the pads, so once I tin the wires themselves, I should not need any additional solder. And white. To those of you watching, if you could do me a favor and let me know how the volume of the music is compared to the volume of my voice. I don't want to be drowning myself out here, and I don't have a whole lot of experience doing this streaming thing. These NEC crees are really nifty because they are labeled red negative, green negative, and blue negative, common positive in the middle over here, as well as they have a diode replacing resistor pre-mounted for the red, so you don't need to use any resistors on these builds, which makes life a little bit easier. Did not get a super clean joint on that. There was a little bit of porosity going on, which is when you have bubbles in your joint. So I want to redo that, make it nice like that one. Go ahead and do the same with these other wires. And lastly, the common positive, which I'm actually going to shorten this one just a hair, as I have a little bit too much exposed wire and I don't want to leave any of that hanging out. A lot of people like to use helping hands or other methods of holding things steady while they work, and I do that occasionally, but as often as not, I find it just as easy to use my work surface and my own two hands. I'm going to run my wires down through the center now, and then we can add the lens. We'll be good to go on this LED. Alrighty, I've got my wires down inside passages that they need to be inside. I'm going to give this thing a lens real quick. Go ahead and pop this seal, as it didn't seem to want to go when I just screwed the lid down. Ah, there it is. Brand new thing, super glue. Gonna wipe that guy off before it dries on there. And then I'm just gonna put a little tiny dab on the end of each of these three legs. Doesn't take much, just enough to make sure that lens is gonna stay secure, not go anywhere on us. Just like so. Add the rest of the heatsink around it. I'm going to use my small needle nose pliers to get this in all the way. Tighten it up till it's nice and snug. And our LED unit is ready to go. This just pops right in the end like that, and then comes out to meet the chassis. Before I do anything else with these wires though, I'm going to strengthen their joints just a little bit by adding a bit of heat shrink and by twisting them together. Goal of doing this is just to help keep the stress off of the solder joints themselves. Unfortunately, I do not have enough outlets where I'm sitting at to hook up my heat gun, so I'm just going to use my solder iron in close proximity to this heat shrink to heat and consequently shrink it. Some people like to use lighters for their heat shrink. I personally feel like that has a higher chance of damaging the wires or the heat shrink, as it's easy to get things too hot. I'm not actually, like stabbing this heat shrink with my iron. I'm just holding it super, super close. Nicely shrunk. That gives those wires just that little bit of added stability I was mentioning. Still believing I'm a wizard, huh? As far as lightsaber wizards go, maybe I'm a level 6, maybe. Just again verify that our length is enough, because I'd much rather have to redo the wires now than later, but it does look like there's going to be plenty of space there. So I'm going to go ahead and twist the ends of these together as well, just so that it's easier to stick down through the body of the saber. Which it always is tricky with one this long. There we go, it's going through this time. Oh boy. Alright, I'm going to make use of one of these claws. Raven comes with claws on it. This is the Sith Stalker version, which means the claws are extra long, and I'm going to attempt to use this one as a wire retrieval tool. Ooh, getting close. Almost there. It did make a loop in the middle of the saber, which is making it tricky. Well, that is unfortunate, but I'm sure you know, because you've been on Twitch a bunch before, Kristen. But for those of you who don't know, if you want to rewatch this video later, or just, only watch the beginning to catch the chassis reveal, it will be available on the channel for, I believe, 14 days to watch. And I will probably be uploading a section of it. Just the chassis reveal, most likely. I'll be uploading that section of it to YouTube probably next week sometime. This is really giving me a rough go. Oh, got one. Comment positive, everybody. Another one's still giving me trouble, though. Do I have something narrower? I believe. Let's give this dowel a shot, huh? I don't remember how I did this on that first one, on Marcel's, but it is all sorts of stuck in there. Maybe I just had happier wires that weren't all twisted up inside. They've made a loop in there. I'm going to try pulling these out and giving them a little stretcheroo so that maybe they won't twist as much inside the hilt. Well, we've gone from about 3 loops in the wire to about 1. So, I'm going to give this another go. Unfortunately, because of the way this heat sink is constructed, I can't just dangle it and drop it through that way because of the wider lip here. That would make things much nicer, but I feel like this is going to help. I feel like this is going to help. Ah, yes, look at that. Way better. It was downright easy. Alright, we got those out there. Next, I'm going to prepare my switches. Here's one. And there ought to be another one around here somewhere. Alright, I remember where I left it. I'm going to run up the stairs real quick. I'll be right back with that other switch. got the switch. So as you can see, these have little bezels on them. Those are custom turned on the lathe. And this one has the leads shortened on it already. That is because the chassis was originally designed, this is actually just a modification of the original design, which was for, thanks Marcel, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, he could come back and watch it later if he'd like, and I'll also probably be on for a little while, so he may be able to tune in later. The chassis design was originally for Marcel's saber, and he was using a nano, as I mentioned earlier, so only one switch, which means the second battery holder, it comes up to about right there, because I didn't need to account for having a second switch. So shortening the leads on this one makes me able to get that in there without having to change anything on this chassis other than the board holder itself. For switches, I generally like to use a little bit of yellow. So I'm going to get my yellow out, and I'm going to get my black out. And it's just dawned upon me, if you're wondering about my sudden silence, that I don't have the nuts for these switches right here. So once again, my apologies for my unprofessionalism, but I will be right back with those nuts. Alright, besides the nuts, I also grabbed a couple of these, which are just round on one side, flat on the other. Their purpose is to go up against the inside of the saber hilt to give the nut a quality surface to tighten down on. So I'm going to move this up out of the way real quick. Same thing, I'm just holding these wires up to it. So I need two of the yellow. I'm going to cut one just a little longer than the other because of the placement of the switches. So I'm going to set my shorter one up there. And I'll do the, actually I'm going to do the longer one, shorter one first. And again with the black, I'm just matching the length of these yellows. There's my black, that's one set. And here's the second. get these guys out of the way real quick. And I'm just going to re-verify so I know which set of wire I'm dealing with, long or short. Short one goes up there. And this guy should be the same like this guy if I've kept proper track. Nope, they're different. Short one goes up there. Alright, two of the same length wire, and gotta use the switch with the longer leads on it. Yeah, I'm just going to bust out my clippers. This is the 30 gauge wire, so I gotta use the 30 gauge stripping holes. As I mentioned very early on, I'm gonna be wiring this saber with a combination of 28 and 30 gauge wire. This 30, I can't twist as much as the 28, it breaks easier, but I still try to get a little bit of a twist on there. Here's the black, and here's the yellow. Now these I am cutting a little bit long, just because I will bend them around. This switch has holes in it, and they're going to be bent around that. So I'm going to stick the black one through one of these holes, and bend it approximately in the middle. This switch is a salvage switch. It's got a little bit of solder on it already. It's making things a little difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't get a little bit of that off. There's also a little bit of the leads from the last one in there. Alright, that's a lot less raggedy. We'll go with that. Add a little bit of new solder to secure the connection. Oop, knocked out my wire. Alright, so I'm actually going to be double heat shrinking this because I have a couple sizes of heat shrink on hand. This first smaller size is going to go over the 30 gauge wire. I feel like I must have accidentally shrunk a chunk of this heat shrink at some point, because depending on which end I cut from, it doesn't seem to want to go on the wire. There we go. But as you can see, it fits over the wire, but it doesn't fit over the connection itself. So I have to use some of my larger heat shrink. But if I use the larger heat shrink, it doesn't shrink down far enough to grab the wire. So it does us no good. So what I do is I will heat shrink just the wire with the smaller stuff. And then shrink some of the larger heat shrink around it. And a larger heat shrink will grab that wire. So we get a nice sturdy connection. may be a little bit excessive on the length, so I'm going to trim a little bit off of there. Slightly shorter piece here. That's a little better. And once again, just shrink that right up. Large heat shrink grabs the small heat shrink grabs the wire, and all is dandy. Just going to repeat that process exactly the same with this other wire, which I already stripped. Generally, when I'm building a chassis like this one, where wires have to run the entire length of the hilt, as opposed to an all-in-one like that OWP I showed off, where I can, put in one wire, it's pretty much entirely at the same time. As by that I mean both ends. I can do at the same time. I like to leave one end. Look at that. I'm totally just not even listening to myself talk here. Generally, I like to leave one end of the wire insulated, just to make sure we're not getting any crossed connections as I go through the construction process. Once again, hook it through, bend it over, and add solder. Heat shrink. Make sure I'm getting it from the unshrunk end. This heat shrink not only serves to help insulate the joint, but it also adds a lot of strength to the equation. First layer. And on goes the second. As I mentioned, I really prefer to have my heat gun when I'm doing this, but I don't have enough outlets from here where I'm able to live stream. So next time I'll really have to run an extension cord or a power strip or something, just so I can make those do that heat shrink a little faster, a little bit more of a proper way to do it. I'm just going to give these a little twist. Generally, I would also like to use the heat shrink, or I'm sorry, the heat gun for this twisting process. Once I had it all twisted up to my liking, I would just hit the wires with that heat gun very briefly, not enough to melt the insulation, but just heat it up a tiny bit, and then when it cools, it will cool a little bit stiffer, so it will stay in that twisted form, so to speak. Now this 30 gauge does twist up fairly nicely, as you can see, but with the 28 gauge, it's definitely nice to have that a little bit of additional stiffness in the twist. So this guy is going to be a little bit different because, as I mentioned, the leads on the switch itself have to be cut shorter in order to facilitate the chassis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tin up these leads. And I'm going to solder these together as if in the same method that I did the LED. Just get these bad boys nicely coated in solder, enough to grab the wire. As I mentioned, once I've tinned the lead and the wire, I'd like to be, that is enough solder to do the connection. I don't need to add any more post iron or post joining, I guess, but also don't want to get excessive with it. Strip my wires, tin them as well. Now obviously I can't, always hold your wires in place while you wait for the solder to cool, folks. Just gonna redo that real quick. Doesn't take much. This time hold it there. Alright, as I was saying, I obviously cannot insulate this one with heat shrink, so what I use instead is this vinyl. It's liquid electrical tape is what it's called. I think it's vinyl based, but it is an alternative method of insulation. While I do prefer heat shrink, it seems to it's better at adding strength, and it's a little bit more user friendly. This is the best thing to do, in my opinion, when heat shrink is not an option. I'm just gonna goop this over those two joints. Make sure that it is fully covered. Also added a little bit up onto the wire because while it doesn't add a lot, it does add a little bit of mechanical strength once it dries, which takes, probably It dries to the touch within about 45 seconds to a minute, and fully dries, I would say, in about 10 minutes, I would guess. It's not listed on the bottle, but that's about when it seems to stop hardening. I do notice that someone new has just tuned in. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you stopping by. As I mentioned, this is mostly dry by this point, but it will continue to harden over the course of the next 10 minutes or so. Go ahead and twist these ones as well. Alrighty, I'm now ready to install these into the hilt. So I'm going to do this one at a time. I'll start with this longer one that goes up top. It actually may be easier to do this shorter one first, so I don't have to push wires past it. But I think I will do the longer one because it's going to be easier to push wires past than to try to reach in there with pliers or a screwdriver or whatever and try and tighten that nut down. Bezel goes in and switch goes in. Sits nicely inside that little bezel. And I now take these wires, I'm going to slip first one of these over it and then the nut. Now this is again another tricky part, trying to manipulate these. Oh boy, should have thought that through. Should have used my retention screw on that heatsink. But I have to now try to manipulate these way down inside the hilt, up around the switch in the proper orientation. And then get the nut screwed down. These guys are tricky. It's never been easy for me. Probably somebody out there has a technique that works super great for putting these things together, but I don't know it, and that's the one thing I dislike about this style of switch. Anything that I have to thread together is not my favorite. Man, come to think of it, speaking of excellent technique, Shamim has a nano biscotti installation video on his YouTube channel that he put up maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I'm not sure. It's been a little while. But he nailed this. Man, first go, and it was done. It seemed to be going about it the same way as I am, though, so it's not so much as a technique improvement as just an improvement in skills. So you go, Shamim. Shout out to you for being awesome. Almost there. If you have been watching through this entire process, kudos to you. But can you make it through a second one? That's going to be the real question. Alrighty. Now, I don't know whether or not the camera is going to pick this up, how the lighting is from way up there, but if it is looking down inside the hilt, you can see that the switch and the backing, this dude, are nicely mounted in there. Everything sits flush and tight, which means we're not going to have any sort of slippage down the line, which is a good thing. I dislike slippage. I dislike slippage. One of these days, fellas, I will learn to not be awkward live. Gary Ripper is a master of it. He and I also both watch this guy named Alex Steele. He's a blacksmith over in England. And holy moly, the way that guy gets excited about what he's doing is awesome sauce. He's got a great energy, great vibes, and he does darned cool stuff too. So I think I am going to do that. I'm going to throw his YouTube channel up at the end of this. On the YouTube video, I'm going to throw this up in the description. If I do decide to keep this video, so you guys can go check him out, because he deserves it. Alright, number 2, and this one's going to be trickier because it is further inside the hilt. From either side, honestly, from whichever side I would have tried to get at it from, it's further inside the hilt. But since I can't get at it from the front, which is just a result of me not thinking very good, thinking straight, it's definitely a ways in there. The stream has been going for almost an hour and a half, and generally I like to take a little break at an hour and a half, so I may just do that now, see if I can't find something a little bit longer to use for getting this bad boy up inside of there. Use the restroom, that kind of thing. So I will go ahead and do that at this time, and I will be right back. Thank you for watching thus far, and I hope you are here to join me when I re-arrive.
This is that one. This couldn't happen again. This is that one.
Alright guys, I got to apologize to you because apparently I forgot to unmute my mic after that little break I took at an hour and a half. So I've just been rambling on over here with nobody to hear what's going on. And a huge shout out to Thagresh for he texted me and let me know that it was indeed turned off. So thank you to him. I also say thanks to him, give him a shout out in the chat for lending me his camera. I don't have mine yet, so this camera that I'm using is actually his. So thank you very much for the pointer, Thagresh. I definitely appreciate it. That was totally, as Mumbo would say, a spoon move. All right, now that that is sorted, hopefully, I'm sure that I lost plenty of viewers because of that, but hopefully there are still a few of you. Yep, looks like there are still a few of you guys around. Thank you for sticking through that era of silence, and hopefully we can get a few more people back on here as I resume now with sound. Okay, so what I just did is you saw me waving around my arms a lot and stressing out. It's because I thought what I had was a common cathode LED, found out is in fact a common anode LED, which I can still work with. I just have to change my process, and that's what I was just now discovering. So I'm going to go ahead and wire this up as a common anode LED, and we will get on with it. I'm going to get out green, blue, red, and white. Let's do these one at a time. Let's start with the red. Grab my little snips real quick. And give myself, I'm going to go for about 75 thousandths of an inch down there. Not that that's a critical number, but in case you're wondering, it's about 75 thousandths, which for you, those of you out in metric land, is approximately 1.5 millimeters, slightly more, but approximately. 1.5 millimeters is about, what is it? It's actually closer to 2 millimeters than 1.5 millimeters. It's slightly less than 2 millimeters. That's what it is. 2 millimeters is about 77, 78 thousandths. So it really pretty much is about 2 millimeters long. I'm going to get myself a little tiny piece of red wire. Or you know what? I've always tried to heat shrink these joints before, and it's been extremely difficult. Just because there's so little to work with down there. But now that I have that that vinyl tape, which I only got just recently, I'm going to go ahead and solder the resistor directly to, get the right one here, directly to that leg, and then I will just insulate all of those joints together. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin this leg down here. Like so. I'm going to snip this one rather short as well, about the same length. Tin it. Just like so. Get my soldering tip, my iron tip itself tinned. And this bugger is wiggling around a lot. Bip. About had it. Alright, it's on there. Got to inspect the joint. These legs are so close together that it's easily possible to... Oh, look at that. I did by gum. I accidentally spread my solder, just a little bit of it, over to one of the other legs. This is where the tip I'm using, let me clean it off real quick so you can see. It's not all that fine of a tip. The narrowest it gets is probably around a millimeter, or about 40 to 50 thousandths of an inch. I do have a finer one, but fine tips burn up much, much easier. So I tend to save that guy. I only put him on when I'm doing really tiny stuff, such as SMD LEDs, or I've got some switches that are just absolutely bonkers tiny for that type of thing. That way I don't have to replace it all the time. I have lost some of my solder in that equation, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And there we go. Joined. One is done. Number one is done. Alright, let's go ahead and do the green and the blue now, which I would like my little snips again for. Can cut these. This outside one is also going to be super short. But this guy in the middle here, I'm going to cut just a little longer, so it's easier to get to. And I will get just a tiny piece of this heat shrink and slip it down over there. So I'm essentially extending my work point outwards by, oh, maybe about 1.5 millimeters or so, just so it's easier to access without getting into those other leads. I went ahead and cut 2 of them because I'll need another one in a minute here for the common. I'm going to go ahead and slip that on as well. Doesn't hurt anything to have that on ahead of time. So throw both of these bad boys on there and then hit it with the heat gun real quick. There we go. Protected. Go ahead and cut both of these resistors off, again with a pretty short leg. Go ahead and tin both of those. I'm just propping them up in this pommel here. I'm not doing anything special with it. Or this chassis piece, rather. I suppose it is kind of the pommel of the chassis, so I can call it that, yeah. Alrighty. There's one. There's two. And the same thing on the LED. Uh-oh. Might sneeze. Alright, we good. Same thing over here, as I mentioned. Just a little bit of solder on each one of those legs. Like so. And we're good to attach our resistors. There's one. And number two, or well, number three technically, but number two for this side of common. Well, I would like a little more solder on there. This guy's being tricky to get into place. There we go. Alright, now before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and throw some of my liquid tape on there to protect that guy. Let some of the excess run off here. I think I'm gonna dig up an old paintbrush or something, just so I'm not trying to use such a massive brush to do little things. Look at the size of this thing. It's way overkill. Way overkill. Alright, get just the corner of it nice and gooped up. One thing I should mention about this stuff, it is a good, it does work pretty well. As I mentioned earlier, heat shrink is the better option where you can. But if you are going to use this stuff, make sure to do it in a well ventilated area. It's pretty fumy. So I'm going to hop up and open the window just as soon as I get this stuff on here. Alright. Let that dry for a minute. I'm going to just hop up and open the window behind me. Okie dokie. Got that window opened. It's just one of those things. It's good to better safe than sorry. Probably am not doing enough of this to where I'm actually going to cause myself any issues. But as with the ESD safe equipment, it's better to be safe than sorry. So I'm just using this knife to clean up a little bit of the overspill. So that I have still plenty of clean leg to solder to on the upside. I did miss one little spot, so I'm going to fix that real quick. Just a little bitty bip, and done. Alright, I am going to do heat shrink on the upper half of these joints, but for the lower half where they're just so tiny, it would be a nightmare trying to get heat shrink in there. So I'm gonna sit this back in here, let it dry while I work on this with this rice part, hooking up the wiring here. Now this is another thing I'm going to pull up the manual for real quick because I can never remember. I'm pretty sure the middle one's a negative, but of these two, RX and TX, I can never remember which is which of those. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the manual real quick. Here we are. Scroll back up there to the table of contents. Using rice. Alright, page 60. There we are. Alright, so this is a different port, you'll notice, but it's the same configuration of wiring. I've used both types before. So we're going to use RX, and if I'm holding it like this, let's see, board is orientated like so. Okay, so RX is on the left and TX is on the right, but it's switched on the board. So if I flip this over, then both of the RXs are on the left, and both of the TXs are on the right. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself, let's see, what color shall I use here? I'm going to use black, of course, for the negative. I'm going to pick orange and purple. Let's use orange and purple. Go ahead and hide this away. Back to the stream. Scoot those over a little bit. I'm not quite ready for those yet. I was a little bit over anxious, over eager. So unfortunately my colors, I would generally do this all in 30, but my colors are a little bit limited in 30 at the moment. I do have more coming in, so for now we're just going to use the 28 for the rice port. It shouldn't hurt. It won't hurt anything to over gauge it like that, so it's not going to be an issue. But the 30 is just a little bit easier to work with. I am eventually going to switch over entirely to 30 gauge. I'm just mostly trying to work through this 28, so I don't want to put any to waste. The one exception is I'm going to keep getting reds and blacks in the 28, so when I have to do big common harnesses like these, I can ensure I've got proper current transfer across the entire thing. Alright, so how long are these going to need to be? They need to go from the port to here, and double back over to the middle of the board, about like so. That away. Don't need him no more. And number 2. Doing this the exact same way I did that first switch on the recharge port. Just throw my wire through, give it a little bend, give it a little twist, give it a little solder. If you would hold still, that'd be great. Welcome to the new viewers. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you dropping by. Same thing on the other side. You know what it is. Heat shrink time. One and 2 and 1 and 2, just like so. Small ones first. Uh-oh. There it is. Goes a little heat. A little bit of heat, a little bit of shrink. Makes the world go around. Bingo. Just like that. Give him a little bend while it's still warm. And lastly, the black, which I have here. And this I'm going to use a 34. Unless, maybe, you know what? I'm going to do a quick manual check again with this guy. Well, it is possible. I knew there was something tricky in here about the recharge port and about how this goes to negative. It says, while it is possible to wire the sleeve ground wire to the ground pad of the board, we recommend to connect it to the battery pack negative and not to the board negative to avoid a kill key / recharge port bypass. In the case a metal female jack is used, in this case it would be a this is a metal female jack. It's partially female anyways. So what we're going to do is, instead of wiring directly to the board negative, which is where this gray wire is going, we're going to wire it directly to the battery pack negative, which is where this black wire here is going to be going. And we're going to, in order to do that, I'm just going to shortcut it and connect it directly to the recharge port down here when we wire in that recharge port. So this is I'm just gonna go ahead and pop this in here like so. Grab my little nut and tighten that bad boy down. And that ought to do that. Rice port is now nicely secured in there. As you can see, I've oriented it so that the two grounds are close together. So when I go ahead and wire this bad boy in there, I will just connect those two as one. I may actually see about if I can just twist that over a little more. Give that a little bit of a benderisky. Give that a little bit of a benderisky. Sorry, I keep going out of frame with my hands when I'm doing stuff. Alright, so what I've done is I've just bent those over to where I can loop one wire through both of those and treat them essentially as one peg. That'll give me a solid connection while keeping my number of wires down. So I don't need this anymore. That can go away. Okay, that should be everything for those two. Seems I can get this recharge port a little tighter. It wiggled on me just a hair. So I'm gonna snug this nut down just a little bit. It is tricky to do while maintaining the orientation, because the way that the nut is held in place is because the 3D printed part that it fits into is very, very snug on that knurled outside of the nut, and so it tries to keep it from spinning. So I'm having to kind of force it through there, but that's a success. It's back tight again. Okay, back to the LED, the accent LED. As you can see, we've got the resistors wired back on. This liquid tape is now fully dried, so I don't have to worry about getting that all over me or anything. We have red, common, green, blue. And the resistors, as I mentioned, are already in place. So I'm going to start with the red. I'm just going to work across that direction. So I'm going to measure out approximately how much I need. About like so. About like that. Give that a little snipperooski. Put the green away. We'll do the same length real quick with the blue and the green and the white while I have them out. Snip. Put that away. Boop. Maybe. There we go. The screen's a mess, but wrap it up and put it away. Lastly, the white. Also a little bit of a mess. Beep. There we go. Just like that. I'm going to strip a little bit off the ends of each one of these. Give that a little twist-a-rooney. Three and four. Check this real quick. Hang on. Alright, sorry about that little delay. Back to it. That's what I'm doing, yes. Lost track for a minute there. Pull all these wires out of this little wider area, like so, which is where they're going to go in the long run anyway. So, give those just a little push, that. Now we can sit that fairly flat. Use the opposite side of the LED holder to make a little stand that I can use in order to get some tinning on these resistor legs, and as well as the remaining LED leg. A little bit, doesn't take a whole lot. Here we go. Do the same thing to these wires real quick. See if I can't prop them up. By just sitting them down where the curve is upwards and resting these on there. Perfect. You know what I'm going to do, since I have it here, I'm going to make my life a little easier by clamping these bad boys together before I solder them. Maybe not. It doesn't seem to want to grab, because the resistor leg is so thin on these little bitty quarter-watt resistors. Well, it sort of works. Not really, so I'm just going to re-tin that a little bit and do it the old-fashioned way. This is another thing that I would change ever so slightly about the chassis. If I were to remake it, I would make that LED holder a little bit snugger, so that not only it holds it tighter right now when I'm trying to deal with it, so that when it's in there for finals, it's not going to be wiggling around on me. Just trying to, there's a little lump in my solder, just trying to get that out, so the heat shrink can go over there without desoldering the entirety of it, of the joint. Alright, seem to have gotten it worked out. So when I'm doing a really tiny joint like this, a real small leg, I like to leave a little bit of the actual resistor leg or LED leg or whatever it is I'm soldering to. I've left about 2.5 millimeters or so, or about 100 thousandths of an inch on there, and that gives the heat shrink a little bit of extra something to grab on and be supported with, support the joint with. Unfortunately, I do seem to be running out of time here, so I don't think I'll be able to finish it today. I'm going to call it quits in about 10 minutes. It's 6 o'clock. We'll call it quits for today. I'll try to come back and finish it tomorrow. I can't make any promises about that because I do have a lot of stuff going on Fridays. But if not tomorrow, then definitely sometime next week I will finish this little stream for you guys. I also still need to finish that. Well, I can't technically. The Darth Maul chassis that I was streaming live a couple of weeks ago. I did end up having to finish that so I could get it ordered off of stream because I have some people waiting on that and I didn't want to drag it out. But I'll probably do some more of the chassis modeling because that people seem to enjoy that. It's also a little less boring I think than this is. I mean, this is pretty much watching me repeat the same processes over and over again in different locations. Whereas with the chassis modeling, it's constantly changing, constantly different, and overall just a little bit more entertaining, I feel like. So I'll probably do more of that. But as I mentioned, about out of time for today, so I'm going to finish hooking up the wires, hooking up these 4 wires to this small 5mm LED, and then I will have to call it quits for today. There's our common positive. Once again, just leave a little bit of the leg for my heat shrink to grab. How's it going, Coat God? Thank you for tuning in. Unfortunately, you caught me right as I'm about to finish up. I have other obligations for tonight, but I will be finishing this build live soon. Hopefully soon. Maybe at the beginning of next week. I'm gonna try for tomorrow, but I do have a lot going on Fridays. Sorry I can't hear as well as I am talking to a bunch of friends. Well, enjoy your friends, buddy. Everybody needs a good group of friends in their life. Alright, that's done. Next up, green. I will follow and see you later when my friends aren't loud. Well, thank you very much, Coat God. I really appreciate it. Drop in the follow on my channel. You know the drill by now. Cut off a little bit of the leg, but leave enough for the heat sink to grab. Slide that over, fits nice and snug. It's a little longer than I want it to be. Easy fix. Boink. One more. Just got the blue left. Just the blue. All sorts of songs with the word blue in them are now, of course, just popping into my head, begging to make an appearance. Unfortunately, I'm not the best singer, but fortunately, I won't be singing because of that reason. You don't have to listen to it. There's that, nice and easy piece of pie. Alright, random question. Cake or pie? Which do you like better, and which is easier? Let me know in the comments. And if I get an answer before I go offline in just a couple minutes here, I will eat some on the next stream. Last piece of heat shrink. Got the heating and the shrinking. Pull that this way, push that way, pull that this way. And just like that, we have an accent LED. So I am going to call it there for today. When we come back, as I said, hopefully tomorrow, but more likely the beginning of next week, I will be, the first thing I'll do is affix this bad boy here, right in there like that. And I will then begin, then at that point it's time to start soldering in the board itself. So make sure to tune in for the next stream. I will post it about on all the usual social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. So definitely make sure to stop by. It's Vapod Lightsabers is the username on both of those social platforms if you have not followed me yet over there. But again, thank you very much for tuning in. かよし